the basil of the house, the caring, sensible, loving wife, the first woman to embrace Islam, the mother of the believers, Khadijah bint Khuwaylid. Khadijah's trade progressed, as did the trade of her husbands, and as the trade of the Quraysh was progressing. Many began to work for her, and they did not find any problem in serving her, but rather they were proud that they worked for this wise managing lady who understood the principles of trade and its finer points, and knew what was in high demand in one area and what was in low demand in another area. She became opinionated in financial affairs. Many merchants did not hesitate to listen to her directives and act on them, because they tried these opinions and were convinced of their success. Khadijah's house became one of the large commercial houses in Mecca, and her stores became the largest and most famous stores. Her money and trade were distinguished by lawfulness and truth. There was no decrease or diminution in the measure and balance, and none of that money was in the way of usury, which was widespread in that environment. She also knew the right of the poor and needy, so she gave it with a contented soul and a good heart, and she was happy with what she provided and with what she relieved of need and removed of distress. She felt that the increase in that money was linked to that giving, so the more charity she did, the more growth and blessings in her wealth. So she increased doing charity until she surpassed men, and people marveled at her and at her trade, which exceeded the trade of many skilled and experienced people. But she was not exempted from harsh ridicule when she entered this field that made men uncomfortable. Her brothers went to her many times, advising her to marry a man who would save her this burden. So she would talk to them about the readiness of men and the readiness of women, and try to convince them that a woman had a heart like a man's heart and strength like his strength. And if she wanted to make her way in life and was determined, the path would be opened for her, the far would approach her, and the difficult would be humiliated for her. Then she would say to them with a smile, "Take it easy on yourselves. I will set an example for those men who make a woman a commodity, limit her activity, imprison her intelligence, and kill her talents within the walls of homes. And I will set an example for those women who hide behind the curtains, devoting their energy and intelligence to what is of no use or benefit." A woman is nothing but a creature that men have tyrannized over. They wanted her to be weak and a prisoner in their hands, eaten and given birth just as animals eat and give birth to people. If her brothers failed to convince her of what they wanted, they left angrily, then returned again when what they heard from people about Khuwaylid's daughter, who did what men did, became difficult for them. Khadijah turned a deaf ear to what people said. She continued on her path which she loved, and in which she found pleasure that distracted her from husbands and pushed her to the increase and diversity. So she has been growing in the eyes of the people. As the days passed, they increased the respect and reverence for her. Also, they appreciated her striving and the strength of her heart, as they appreciated her kindness and compassion, her concern for her children, and sharing with her money in every good deed, as the leaders of Quraysh shared, and above what they gave. The women were proud of Khadijah in front of their husbands, proving to them the ability and strength of the woman, and that she was no less than the men, and that if men had distanced women from their prison, they would have come out to life, become rich as Khadijah, and convinced men as she had convinced them. With the increase of this wealth and the expansion of this fame, the greed of the masters of Mecca and its youth to marry Khadijah increased. They were begging her and giving everything they had. But she became too preoccupied for this with what she was in, not thinking about marriage. She did not look at it, nor listen to those who begged her. The older she got, the sweeter she became in the eyes of men, and the more their increased desire was to marry her. But none of these greedy people dared to talk to her about that matter, for she had a prestige that captured the hearts of men and held their tongues. She had a personality before which great people became insignificant, so they turned to male and female mediators for help, while she continued on the path she had drawn. However, one night she was asleep in her bed, after an evening that extended until midnight, during which she calculated the prices of the goods that were sent to Yemen and estimated the expected profit for her after calculating the expenses and charity. When she saw the clear sky, the bright sun, and the whole world beautiful and sweet. Then she looked and saw the sun descending from the sky, its rays increasing, its disk becoming larger, and its light becoming more luminous. So it entered her house, filled it with light, and flooded it with radiance. Then it sent light to its surroundings of Mecca, extending it beyond Mecca, until it covered the whole earth. She woke up from her sleep and opened her eyes to the sides of the house. She found it as it was, unchanged. She found her maids asleep, deep in their sleep, whereas the world was still and the night was quiet. So she sat in her bed, thinking about that sun which was in the house, until the signs of morning appeared. So she got dressed, called some of her servants, and hurried to the house of her cousin, Waraqa ibn Nawfal. Waraqa said in astonishment, "What brought you, Khadijah, at this early hour, whereas people like you are only woken up by the noise of Mecca at midday?" Khadijah said, and a trace of her astonishment appeared on her face, "It is something good, Waraqa. Do you have an interpretation of the vision?" So Waraqa listened to her as she told him the story of the big sparkling sun. His face shone as she progressed in her story, and he was relieved as she approached its completion, until she finished. Then he shouted happily, "Congratulations, Khadijah! You are getting married, my cousin." Her astonishment increased, and she shouted in anger, "You know, Waraqa, that I abandoned men and turned to what was more important. You know that I gave myself to my children and my business. Are you serious? Reconsider the interpretation of this vision if you are not joking. You may be guided to something else. I will not get married." Waraqa's smile grew more relaxed. Then he said gently, "You will get married, Khadijah. I don't like joking. You know me and you know my way. You will marry the shining sun which will remove the darkness, illuminate the world, and guide people to the right path after they have gone astray and become blind. Oh, Khadijah, you will marry a man other than men. You will marry a prophet, oh Khadijah." Khadijah shook, as if she had been in a dream and then woke up from it. She did not speak. Waraqa resumed, saying with confidence, "O Khadijah, this prophet will be sent from among the Arabs, as stated in the books that I have read, and his time has approached. God will choose for him a righteous wife. who will stand with him, help him, and fight his enemies. Are you ready for this striving, Khadijah? Prepare yourself from today, for your vision confirms that you are the wife of that prophet. Then Khadijah got up to her house. She was between the believer one and the denier one, saying to herself in confusion, what Waraqah said may be true, and he may have interpreted this vision according to the extent of his diligence. What is the relationship between this big son and that prophet? How was Waraqah able to determine that this prophet was an Arab, and that I would be his wife? She proceeded in this way until she reached home and turned to her work. That interpretation became her preoccupation, even if she did not talk about it to anyone. The time of the Yemen caravan approached. The workers were packing the goods and preparing the camels, the water bladders, and the containers of provisions. When the time of departure approached, Abu Talib ibn Abd al-Muttalib ibn Hashim, the master of Mecca, went to her. They had a conversation which pleased both of them. But more about this conversation in our next episode.